Commander Jessica Hayes jolted awake to the shriek of emergency sirens. Red warning lights pulsed across her quarters aboard the Olympus station, Earth's most advanced defense platform orbiting Jupiter. She'd been dreaming of home. Her sister's farm in Montana, tall grass swaying in summer wind, when reality crashed in with brutal efficiency. All command personnel report to Central Operations immediately, the AI's voice announced, its typical calm undermined by elevated volume. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Hayes was dressed and moving in under 30 seconds, military efficiency overriding confusion. The corridor outside her quarters teemed with personnel, their faces masks of controlled panic. What's happening? She asked Lieutenant Rodriguez as they hurried toward the command center. Unknown vessels, ma'am. Hundreds of them. They just appeared at the edge of the system. Hayes felt ice form in her stomach. Humanity had been alone among the stars for all its exploratory history. First contact wasn't supposed to happen like this, not with fleets of unknown ships bypassing all outer detection grids. The command center doors parted to reveal organized chaos. Admiral Wallace stood at the central holographic display, his weathered face illuminated by the projection of Jupiter and its moons, and beyond them, a swarm of unidentified craft that the computer struggled to count. Hayes, Wallace acknowledged with a nod. Good. We need our best tactical mind right now. Before she could respond, the communications officer called out, Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's directed at all human frequencies simultaneously. Wallace's expression hardened. Let's hear what they have to say. The main screen flickered, resolving into an image that made Hayes's breath catch. The beam displayed was vaguely humanoid, but composed of what appeared to be interlocking crystalline structures that shifted and refracted light. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonic undertones that made the hairs on Hayes's arms stand on end. People of Earth, we are the Valora Concordance. For 3 of your centuries, we have observed your development, your conflicts, your halting steps toward civilization. We have deliberated, and judgment has been rendered. Humanity has been found unworthy of its place in the galactic community. A stunned silence fell over the command center. Hayes felt her hands clench into fists. Your species exhibits dangerous tendencies toward chaos and aggression. Your technological development outpaces your ethical maturity. This combination cannot be permitted to spread beyond your world. You will submit to Valoran guidance and restriction, or you will be removed. You have 14 of your Earth rotations to signal your surrender. Admiral Wallace stepped forward. This is Admiral James Wallace of the United Earth Defense Force. We welcome peaceful contact with your civilization, but we reject your judgment. Earth and her colonies are sovereign territories. We request diplomatic. The crystalline being made a dismissive gesture, cutting Wallace off. To demonstrate our resolve, observe. The holographic display tracking the alien fleet showed a smaller vessel breaking formation, accelerating toward Mars. What are they doing? Rodriguez whispered. Hayes didn't answer, transfixed by the unfolding scene. The alien vessel positioned itself near Phobos, one of Mars' moons, a beam of coherent energy, so intensely bright that the station's filters darkened the display, lanced from the ship to the small moon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Phobos, a celestial body 16 kilometers in diameter, orbiting Mars for billions of years, simply disintegrated. Where the moon had been, only a cloud of expanding particles remained. This discussion is concluded, the Valoran representative stated. 14 days. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in horrified silence. Hayes stared at the display, watching the dust that had once been Phobos scatter across Mars' orbit. A demonstration, the alien had called it. She understood the message perfectly. Resistance would be met with annihilation. Orders, sir, she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Admiral Wallace looked at her, his face ashen. We need to contact Earth immediately. And God help us all. 3 days after the Valoran ultimatum, Earth's orbital defense grid had been systematically dismantled. The crystalline ships maintained a perfect blockade formation, allowing nothing in or out. Commander Jessica Hayes stood at the viewport of the emergency shuttle that had evacuated the Olympus station personnel, watching Earth grow larger as they approached, a beautiful blue marble surrounded by the glittering network of alien vessels. Atmospheric entry in 5 minutes, the pilot announced. Destination: Mountain Home. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Mountain Home. Those are civilian evacuation protocols. Command headquarters is in. Change of plans, Commander, interrupted General Marcus Thompson, materializing beside her. Hayes hadn't even noticed him boarding the shuttle. Your presence is required elsewhere. Thompson was a legend in military circles, a towering figure with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate every person they fell upon as a potential asset or liability. Hayes had met him exactly once, 7 years prior, during a ceremony where she'd received commendation for service in the Neptune security conflict. Sir, Hayes acknowledged, straightening instinctively. May I ask where we're going? No, Thompson replied simply. You'll be briefed when we arrive. The shuttle banked sharply, diving below the cloud cover toward the jagged peaks of what Hayes recognized as the northern Rocky Mountains. They descended toward what appeared to be an unremarkable valley. But as they approached, a section of the mountainside shimmered and disappeared, a holographic concealment masking a massive hangar entrance. Welcome to Project Prometheus, Thompson said as the shuttle touched down in a vast underground facility. The reason the Valorans want us contained. Hayes followed Thompson through security checkpoints where her biometrics were scanned at levels she never experienced, even with her top-secret clearance. They descended in a high-speed elevator that seemed to travel for minutes, suggesting they were going extraordinarily deep. 5 years ago, Thompson began without preamble. You volunteered for experimental neural augmentation. Officially, it was to improve pilot response time in zero-G environments. Hayes nodded cautiously. Those records are sealed. Because the technology wasn't ours, Thompson continued. Not originally. The elevator doors opened to reveal an enormous cavern housing what could only be described as a shipyard, but unlike any Hayes had ever seen. The vessels under construction defied conventional aerospace design, their hulls flowing in curves that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In 2118, a research team in Antarctica discovered something buried under 2 miles of ice. Thompson explained as they walked. A spacecraft of unknown origin, but with one peculiar feature: its control systems were designed for human neural architecture. Not alien hands, not alien minds. Human. Hayes stopped walking, the implications hitting her. That's impossible. Unless it wasn't alien, Thompson finished. At least, not in the way we typically define the term. The technology was created by humans, just not our civilization. He led her to a secure room where a holographic display activated, showing scans of an ancient vessel alongside diagrams of human DNA sequences. The ship is approximately 15,000 years old, Thompson continued, predating all known human civilizations. The neural interface technology was so advanced that our scientists have spent decades reverse engineering it. What we discovered was concerning. The neural linkages don't just allow for control, they enable evolution. Hayes' eyes narrowed. Evolution. The Valorans called it chaos adaptation. We call it the next step in human potential. When linked to these systems, the human mind breaks through limitations. It adapts, it evolves. And that, Commander Hayes, is precisely what terrifies our new alien overlords. Thompson gestured to a door at the far end of the room. Your military record contains extensive redactions because you're one of only 17 humans who fully bonded with the prototype interface without rejection. We need you to lead a squadron of similarly compatible pilots. Hayes stared at the alien yet somehow human ships. To do what exactly? Thompson's expression hardened. to show the Valorans why they were right to fear us. Commander Jessica Hayes reviewed the personnel files spread across her workstation in the cramped underground office that had become her home for the past week. Finding compatible pilots was proving more difficult than General Thompson had suggested. The neural compatibility markers were exceedingly rare. Less than 1 in a million humans possessed the right combination of neurological patterns. "These are the final candidates," Dr. Norton said, sliding 5 additional files across the desk. "They're the only ones within reach who might survive the bonding process." Hayes opened the first file and frowned. Ryan Cooper, court-martialed for insubordination and intoxication during duty hours. "You can't be serious." "His spatial awareness scores are off the charts," Norton replied. 3 standard deviations above any pilot we've ever tested. And his neural scans show perfect compatibility with the interface. Hayes moved to the next file. Dr. Ellie Morgan. She's not even military. She's the leading expert on quantum field manipulation, the principle behind the gravitic weaponry systems. She understood the ancient propulsion systems when our best engineers were still scratching their heads. The third file made Hayes pause. Joe Franklin. He's a convicted felon. Norton nodded. Former bank robber with reflex speeds that broke our testing equipment. He can process visual information and respond physically faster than any human subject we've documented. He was recruited from prison with a conditional pardon. The final file contained 2 photos, nearly identical young faces. Amber and Jason Davis. 22 years old, twins. They share a rare form of neural synchronicity, Norton explained. When separated, they're unremarkable. Together, they can coordinate complex systems with perfect efficiency. It's almost like a natural hive mind. Hayes closed the files with a sigh. So this is Earth's last hope. A drunk, a scientist, a criminal, and a pair of kids barely old enough to drink. "And you," Norton added quietly. "Don't forget yourself." An alarm blared through the facility before Hayes could respond. The wall screen activated automatically, showing a live news feed. The Valoran fleet had begun its cleansing operations, targeting the outer colonies first. The Europa Research Station, home to over 300 scientists and their families, had been reduced to fragments. Hayes watched in horror as the reporter's voice broke, describing the destruction of the Jupiter mining operations next. 8,000 colonists. No warnings. No survivors. "They're sending a message," Norton whispered. "Comply or die." Hayes stood abruptly. "Where is Cooper now?" "Habitation level. Section C. Why?" "Because I need to know if he's worth saving." She found Cooper in the mess hall, a nearly empty bottle of contraband whiskey on the table before him. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands trembling slightly. "Commander," he slurred, attempting to stand. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You had family in the Jupiter colonies," Hayes stated rather than asked. She'd read it in his file. Cooper's face hardened. Wife and daughter. 6 and 8 years old. He gestured to the bottle. "I'm holding a proper funeral. Care to join me?" Hayes sat across from him. "I need you sober, Cooper. I need you functional. I need you angry, not drunk." "Why?" "So I can fly some fancy experimental ship on a suicide mission." "No thanks." Hayes leaned forward. "So you can make them pay." Cooper's bloodshot eyes focused sharply, a flash of something primal cutting through the alcohol haze. "You don't understand what it's like to lose everything." "Not yet," Hayes replied. "But I've seen the Valoran battle plans. They're going to sterilize Earth city by city, saving the largest population centers for last. Everyone will lose everything, Cooper. The only question is whether you help us stop it." She stood to leave, but Cooper's hand shot out with surprising speed, grabbing her wrist. "How?" he asked, the single word loaded with grief and rage, and something else, the faintest glimmer of hope. Hayes met his gaze. "By becoming something they've never seen before, something they fear." Cooper released her wrist and straightened in his chair. When do we start? The stealth transport rumbled as it entered Saturn's magnetosphere, disguised as nothing more than a chunk of space debris among thousands. Inside, Commander Jessica Hayes and her 5 pilots sat in pressurized acceleration couches, each connected to neural interface nodes that would link them to their prototype ships once deployed. "Approach vector nominal," reported Lieutenant Reeves, one of the few conventional pilots cleared for the mission. "Deployment zone in 3 minutes." Hayes glanced at her team. 2 weeks of intensive neural integration training had changed them all. Cooper had embraced sobriety with the same intensity he'd once devoted to drinking. Dr. Morgan had surprised everyone by adapting to combat simulations with unexpected proficiency. Franklin maintained his sardonic humor, but his eyes had gained a focused intensity. The Davis twins remained eerily synchronized, often completing each other's sentences without realizing it. "Remember," Hayes said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, "this is a hit-and-run operation. We test the ship's capabilities, gather combat data on Valora response patterns, and withdraw before they can organize a counterstrike." "We know the drill, Commander," Franklin drawled. "Get in, kick ass. Get out, don't die." The last part being somewhat important, Cooper added dryly. The transport shuddered as it released 5 stealth drones, the transport shells for their actual vessels. The shells would break apart once they reached the deployment zone, revealing the prototype ships inside. "Neural interface initialization in 30 seconds, Dr. Morgan announced, monitoring the connection equipment. "Sync rate at 97%. That's better than simulations." Hayes closed her eyes as the neural interface activated. The familiar cold rush flooded her consciousness, followed by expanding awareness as her mind merged with the ship's systems. It was like gaining an entirely new body, one made of composite alloys and energy fields rather than flesh and blood. "All pilots report," she commanded through the neural link, her thoughts transmitting directly to her team. Cooper, sensed and operational. Morgan, systems nominal. Franklin, ready to rock. Amber Davis, synchronized. Jason Davis, in harmony. Hayes felt their minds brush against hers through the shared network, a strange, intimate connection unlike anything in conventional communication. "Target acquired," Cooper reported. "Valoran Scout Fleet, 8 vessels, standard patrol formation near Saturn's 6th ring." "They haven't detected us," Morgan added. "Their scanning patterns show routine sweep protocols." Hayes made the decision instantly. "Weapons hot. Execute attack pattern Prometheus Alpha." Their 5 ships, nearly invisible against the backdrop of Saturn's rings, accelerated toward the unsuspecting Valoran patrol. The first indication the aliens had of their presence was when Hayes's gravitic cannon fired, the invisible distortion tearing through the lead Valoran scout ship's crystalline hull. For 47 glorious seconds, the battle was entirely one-sided. The human ships moved with impossible precision, their neural-linked pilots reacting at speeds no conventional interface could match. 2 Valoran vessels were destroyed outright, a third crippled and venting atmosphere. Then everything went wrong. "Energy spike," Morgan shouted through the neural link. "Saturn's magnetic field is interfering with our gravitic systems." Hayes felt it immediately, a searing feedback through the neural connection, like molten metal poured directly into her brain. Her vision blurred as blood vessels ruptured in her eyes. "Withdraw," she commanded, fighting through the pain. "Emergency protocol. All ships break contact." The surviving Valoran vessels, recovering from their surprise, began to coordinate a response. Energy weapons lashed out, missing the human ships but coming unnervingly close with each shot. "They're adapting to our movement patterns," Jason warned, his voice strained. Franklin's ship, positioned farthest from the group, took a direct hit to its propulsion system. Hayes felt his pain through the neural network as electrical feedback surged through his interface. "Franklin, status," she demanded. "I'm hit," he replied, his mental voice oddly calm. "Navigation down. Neural interface destabilizing." But I've got an idea. We're coming to get you, Cooper insisted. Negative, Franklin countered. Their flagship is charging weapons. Big ones. They'll cut you to pieces before you reach me. Hayes saw his intention form in the shared neural space before he verbalized it. Franklin, don't. It's been fun, folks, Franklin interrupted. Cooper, have a drink for me when this is over. Before anyone could respond, Franklin's damaged ship accelerated directly toward the Valora flagship, his remaining power diverted to engines. I can see them, came Franklin's final transmission, filled with wonder rather than fear. I'm in their network. Commander, they're terrified of us. They call us the Awakening Ones. They've seen this before. They've been hunting us for millennia. Franklin's ship collided with the Valoran flagship in a blinding flash of light. The explosion disrupted the alien formation long enough for the remaining human vessels to slip away, trailing ionic particles like blood and water. The journey back to Earth was silent, each surviving pilot locked in their own grief. Franklin's sacrifice had saved them, but the neural echoes of his final moments lingered in their shared connection, a phantom limb syndrome of the mind. Commander Jessica Hayes felt it most acutely. As squadron leader, her neural interface had maintained the strongest link with each pilot. 3 days after their return to the Prometheus facility, Hayes called the team to the mission planning chamber. We're going to Mars, she announced without preamble. Cooper looked up sharply. Mars. The Valorans established their primary forward base, thereafter destroying Phobos. Exactly, Hayes confirmed. Franklin's last transmission mentioned something about hunting us for millennia. I want to know what that means. Dr. Morgan activated the holographic display, showing detailed scans of the Valoran base constructed on the Martian surface. Their central data hub should be located here. She indicated a crystalline spire rising from the center of the complex. If we're going to find answers, that's where they'll be. How do we get past their security? Amber Davis asked, her voice hollow. Since their return, she had barely spoken, the loss of Franklin compounded by the weakening neural connection with her twin. Hayes nodded to Morgan, who brought up schematics for what appeared to be environmental suits, but with significant modifications. We've reverse-engineered Valoran stealth technology from fragments recovered after Franklin's action, Morgan explained. These infiltration suits should mask our biosignatures enough to get us inside. Should? Cooper questioned. It's untested, Morgan admitted, but it's the best option we have. The Martian insertion went smoother than expected. The Valorans, confident in their overwhelming technological superiority, had established minimal perimeter defenses. Their crystalline structures rose from the red soil like alien trees, pulsing with internal light that cast strange shadows across the landscape. Stay linked but maintain communication discipline, Hayes subvocalized through the neural interface as they approached the central spire. Morgan, you're with me. The rest of you secure our exit route. Inside the structure, Hayes and Morgan navigated corridors that seemed to shift subtly, geometric patterns flowing like liquid crystal across the walls. They encountered no Valoran guards. The aliens evidently relied on automated security systems that their stealth suits successfully bypassed. The data hub was a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline matrix that resembled a frozen explosion. Countless shards suspended in midair, each containing what appeared to be stored information. I need time, Morgan whispered, connecting her specialized equipment to an access node. Their data architecture is complex, but it follows patterns similar to the ancient technology from Antarctica. Hayes kept watch while Morgan worked, her mind racing. Franklin's final words had haunted her sleep. The Awakening Ones. What did it mean? I got something, Morgan announced suddenly, her voice tight with urgency. Hayes, you need to see this. The holographic display from Morgan's equipment showed Valoran text being translated in real time. Hayes watched as images appeared, human DNA strands alongside neural pathway maps. They've been studying us for thousands of years, Morgan explained. The Valorans call it chaos adaptation. Our ability to form neural bonds with technology in ways they find disturbing. Hayes scanned the data. Why would that frighten a species as advanced as the Valorans? Because when bonded with advanced tech, humans can push beyond the intended limitations. We don't just use technology. We merge with it, adapt it, evolve through it. Morgan's eyes widened as she accessed deeper files. There's more. Earth isn't the first world they've judged unworthy. Dozens of species have been contained or exterminated by the Valora Concordance over millennia. A proximity alert flashed through their neural link. "We've got company," Cooper warned. "Multiple hostiles approaching your position." Hayes began to respond when a familiar presence touched her mind. Jason Davis. But something was wrong. His neural signal was erratic, fragmented. "They'd got me," came his weak transmission. "South quadrant. Don't come. Trap." His signal cut off abruptly, replaced by his sister's agonized scream through the neural network. Hayes felt Amber's mind fracture as she experienced her twin's pain. "Jason's been captured," Hayes relayed to Morgan. "We need to move now." But Morgan had frozen, staring at a new set of files she'd unlocked. Hayes, the Prometheus technology. It wasn't alien at all. It was human. The extraction from Mars had been chaotic and bloody. Amber's psychic agony had cascaded through their neural network, temporarily disabling their coordination. Only Cooper's quick thinking, forcibly disconnecting Amber from the interface, had allowed them to escape the Valoran facility with their lives and the precious data Morgan had stolen. But they'd left Jason behind. 1 week later, Commander Jessica Hayes stood in the Prometheus facility's medical bay, watching Amber through the observation window. The young woman lay motionless on the bed, her vital signs stable but her mind withdrawn to some unreachable place. "She felt everything they did to him," Dr. Morgan said softly, joining Hayes at the window. "The neural link between twins was stronger than we anticipated. When they dissected him, she experienced it all." Hayes's jaw tightened. "Can she recover?" "Physically, yes. Mentally." Morgan shook her head. "I don't know." "We need her," Hayes insisted. "The data you retrieved confirms it. The Valorans are vulnerable to emotional feedback through the neural systems, and the Davis twins had the strongest emotional resonance of any candidates." Morgan's expression hardened. "You want to use her trauma as a weapon." "I want to use everything we have," Hayes corrected. "The Valorans are 3 days away from their deadline. We're out of options and out of time." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Hayes's neural implant. General Thompson requesting her presence in the command center. She found him reviewing tactical displays showing the Valoran fleet movements around Earth. "Our conventional forces are ready for the diversionary attack," Thompson informed her without looking up. "Every functional ship we have will engage the blockade in 6 hours. It should create a window for your squadron to slip through." Hayes studied the plan, frowning. "Sir, with respect, this is suicide for our regular forces." "It's suicide either way, Commander," Thompson replied grimly. "But if your team can reach their command ship with Dr. Morgan's modifications to the neural interfaces." About those modifications, Hayes began carefully. "They're untested. The first prototype killed the test subject." Lieutenant Cruz volunteered. Thompson said, his voice tight. He knew the risks. Hayes remembered the footage all too well. Cruz's convulsions as the enhanced neural interface overwhelmed his system, the screams as his mind burned out from within. And now they were planning to use that same technology on her remaining pilots. The interface modifications will allow you to deliberately trigger what the Valorans call chaos adaptation, Morgan explained as she entered the command center. It pushes human-machine integration beyond safe parameters, allowing the pilots to directly interface with and potentially corrupt Valoran systems. At what cost? Hayes demanded. Morgan met her gaze unflinchingly. Significant neurological damage, possible organ failure, eventual death. Hayes nodded. She'd expected as much. Have you told the others? They know, Morgan confirmed. They've all volunteered, even Amber. Hayes turned in surprise. Amber is conscious. She woke an hour ago, Morgan said. And she's different. Hayes found Amber in the preparation chamber, already being fitted with the modified neural interface apparatus. The young woman's eyes locked onto Hayes's, and the commander nearly took a step backward. Something had changed behind those eyes, something feral and burning with purpose. I felt them kill him, Amber said, her voice unnervingly calm. But at the end, something happened. Jason pushed back through their system. I felt him tear through their neural network before he died. He screamed, and their entire facility went dark. Hayes approached slowly. Amber, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Amber replied. Because I can still feel him, Commander. Fragments of Jason's consciousness scattered through their network. And I'm going to find every piece. In the adjacent chamber, Cooper was already undergoing the procedure, reciting names under his breath as the enhanced interface was calibrated to his neural pathways. The names of his wife and daughter, a litany against the pain. Hayes watched through the glass as Morgan administered the final injections that would temporarily enhance their neural plasticity, allowing for deeper integration than any human should survive. They've been hunting us for millennia, Hayes murmured, remembering Franklin's final words. And now, Amber whispered, we hunt them. The battle above Earth's atmosphere was beautiful in its terrible symmetry. Humanity's remaining warships, a patchwork fleet of military vessels, repurposed civilian craft, and experimental prototypes, engaged the Valoran blockade in a desperate frontal assault. Brilliant energy weapons crisscrossed the void, nuclear detonations bloomed like silent flowers, and debris from both human and alien ships scattered across orbital paths. It was, as General Thompson had predicted, a slaughter, but it served its purpose. Commander Jessica Hayes felt no fear as her squadron approached the Valoran flagship, only a strange detached clarity enhanced by the modified neural interface. The experimental ships moved through the chaos of battle like ghosts, their gravitic drives bending light around their hulls. Her perception had expanded beyond normal human limits. She could feel Cooper and Morgan beside her, their minds brushing against hers through the shared neural network. Amber's presence was different, fractured, kaleidoscopic, burning with an intensity that threatened to overwhelm the system. Approach vector clear, Cooper reported, his mental voice strangely musical through the enhanced connection. Their defensive grid is focused on the main battle. Primary hull breach point identified, Morgan added, her consciousness analyzing the crystalline flagship structure, detecting minimal internal security protocols. They never expected anyone to get this close. They penetrated the Valoran vessel through what appeared to be a maintenance access point, their ships nestling into crystalline docking tubes that seemed to pulse with internal light. As they exited their vessels, Hayes noticed her hands were bleeding. The neural feedback had grown so intense that her capillaries were rupturing. Stay focused, she commanded as they moved through corridors that defied conventional geometry. Remember your training. But no training could have prepared them for the interior of the Valoran flagship. Reality itself seemed fluid as the vessel operated on principles beyond human comprehension. Corridors shifted and rearranged themselves, gravity reversed without warning, and strange crystalline growths reached toward the intruders like predatory plants. Their architecture is adaptive, Morgan explained, her words echoing strangely through both verbal and neural channels. The ship itself is partially conscious, an extension of their collective mind. Hayes felt her enhanced neural interface struggling to compensate for the alien environment. Blood trickled from her nose as her brain chemistry altered to maintain the connection. Cooper looked even worse. His eyes had begun to leak a clear fluid that wasn't quite tears. Central chamber ahead, Amber announced, her voice unnervingly calm despite the rivulets of blood flowing from her ears. I can feel them waiting. So many minds, but one purpose. The chamber they entered was vast beyond reason, its dimensions seeming to extend infinitely in all directions. At its center floated a complex crystalline structure resembling a massive neural network made physical, nodes and connections shimmering with internal light that pulsed in hypnotic rhythms. The composite consciousness, Morgan whispered, awe momentarily overriding her scientific detachment. The collective intellect of the Valorans' greatest minds merged into a singular entity. Tendrils of crystalline light reached toward them, probing, analyzing. Hayes felt something alien brush against her mind, cold, ancient, and utterly convinced of its own superiority. Humans, the thought formed directly in their minds, bypassing language entirely. You have been judged unworthy. Your resistance is noted. Your potential is acknowledged. Your evolution must be contained. The tendrils of light accelerated, piercing their neural interfaces. Hayes gasped as foreign consciousness invaded her mind, methodically dissecting her thoughts, her memories, her very sense of self. Now, she managed to shout through the pain. Cooper and Morgan activated the final stage of their enhanced interfaces simultaneously, pushing beyond the safety protocols Dr. Morgan had established. Their mental barriers collapsed, allowing the Valoran consciousness to pour in, but also allowing their own chaotic human thought patterns to flow outward. Amber moved differently. While the others opened themselves to invasion, she launched a mental assault of her own, deliberately overloading her neural interface while projecting her twins' final agonized moments. The twins' neural synchronicity, amplified by the enhanced interface and Amber's raw emotional trauma, created a feedback loop that the ordered Valoran consciousness could not process. The crystalline structure at the center of the chamber began to vibrate. Cracks appeared along its perfect geometric surface. Impossible, the collective mind projected. Chaos cannot overcome order. Amber smiled through blood-stained teeth. Watch us. 3 months after the battle at the Valoran flagship, Commander Jessica Hayes stood before the United Earth Council in the rebuilt Geneva headquarters. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the circular chamber where Earth's remaining leaders had gathered to hear her report. Her once dark hair was now streaked with white, and her eyes contained subtle flecks of crystalline light that medical scans could not explain. The Valoran threat has been neutralized, Hayes stated, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. Their command structure collapsed when their composite consciousness was corrupted. The remaining ships have withdrawn beyond Neptune's orbit. And the cost? Asked Counselor Reyes, her expression grave. Hayes paused, memories washing over her. Cooper's final moments as his enhanced neural interface burned out his brain from within. Morgan's desperate attempt to stabilize the feedback cascade. Amber's triumphant scream as she channeled her brother's death into the Valoran network, creating a chain reaction that shattered their ordered consciousness. Hi, Hayes finally answered. Of my squadron, only Dr. Morgan and I survived. Both of us are changed by what happened. She didn't elaborate on those changes. How sometimes she heard whispers at the edge of her consciousness, fragments of Cooper and the others lingering in the neural network. How Morgan's eyes sometimes flickered with the same crystalline light when she worked with the recovered Valoran technology. The Valorans will return, Hayes continued. Not immediately, but eventually. They consider us an existential threat to their conception of universal order. However, we've gained valuable time to prepare. Dr. Morgan stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed star maps with dozens of highlighted systems. We've identified other worlds previously judged unworthy by the Valora concordance. Many still harbor survivors. We've already established contact with 3 species who share humanity's capacity for neural adaptation. Counselor Reyes leaned forward. You're proposing an alliance. I'm proposing a revolution, Morgan corrected. The Valorans have dominated this sector of the galaxy for millennia, containing or exterminating any species that exhibited what they call chaos adaptation. It's time we united against their tyranny. Hayes nodded toward the next holographic display, which showed DNA sequences alongside ancient technological schematics recovered from Antarctica. There's something else the Council should know. Our analysis confirms that the Prometheus technology was never alien in origin. It was human technology from a forgotten civilization that flourished and fell before recorded history. Murmurs spread through the chamber as Morgan continued the explanation. The neural interfaces work so seamlessly with human biology because they were designed for humans. The Valorans didn't come to judge humanity. They came to contain something they feared since their species first looked to the stars, our unlimited potential for both creation and destruction. As the council session concluded, Hayes stepped outside into the spring air. Geneva was being rebuilt, like cities across Earth. The Valoran attack had devastated major population centers, but humanity had endured. They always did. Commander, a young lieutenant approached, offering a data tablet. We've detected unusual energy signatures from the lunar colonies. Dr. Morgan requested you review them personally. Hayes nodded, taking the tablet. The readings showed familiar patterns, neural activity where none should exist, spreading through recovered Valoran technology like a living network. She remembered Franklin's words before his sacrifice. They call us the Awakening Ones. Perhaps Franklin had been more right than he knew. Perhaps humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, but for the right to determine their own evolution, no matter how chaotic, unpredictable, or terrifying it might be to a universe that prizes order above all. Hayes felt the presence of her fallen comrades more strongly in that moment, like echoes resonating through an unseen dimension. Cooper's strategic mind, Franklin's rebellious spirit, the Davis twins' synchronized brilliance, fragments preserved in the vast neural network that now extended beyond human comprehension. "Are you all right, Commander?" the lieutenant asked, noticing her distant expression. Hayes smiled, the crystalline flecks in her eyes catching the sunlight. "Better than all right, Lieutenant. For the first time in human history, we're truly awake." She turned toward the horizon, where construction crews worked to rebuild. The Valorans had tried to contain humanity, to judge them unworthy of their potential. Instead, they had only accelerated the very awakening they feared. "The universe should be more afraid of what happens when we finally wake up," Hayes whispered to herself. "Well, we're awake now." And somewhere in the neural network that spanned Earth's recovered technology, the preserved consciousness of her squadron seemed to whisper back, "We're just getting started."